I do believe that God has not called us to live in a comfort zone. I don't think that he's called us into retirement, quote unquote, as like you traditionally think of it. Doesn't mean you might not do something different, serve in a different way, et cetera. But I think where God calls us, God will equip us. Number one. It does take faith to step out and walk away from something that I was very, 3+ decades. I mean, very comfortable, very good at, had developed, those gifts and skills and talents over that long period of time, and to do something different. But at the same time, that's kind of what's a little bit exhilarating and energizing about doing that. And I can say that I have felt, now we're only, 3+ weeks, almost about 4 weeks into the campaign here, but I have felt a tremendous sense of peace.
Hey, housewives, come on in. You know the dirty dishes are still in the sink from yesterday and the laundry is still in the basket. Pop your AirPods in and make yourself at home here.
I'm Tracy.
I'm Tori.
And we are your Unlikely Housewives. Stepping out in faith and believing that God calls the unlikely, we are here to show you the appreciation and validation you deserve, lead you to authentic relationships, and release you of believing the cultural lies to restore your faith and wellness.
Pull up those high-waisted yoga pants, tighten your top knot, and reheat your coffee for the third time. Turn up the volume, and let's go. Hey, housewives.
Hey.
We are I can't open a door. Let me tell you that. Like, God is so cool. And just seeing how, like, he has things in the works so long before we can even imagine, right? Like, this conversation that we got to have with Philip Sarnecki is incredible. But again, it goes, like, I've had the pleasure of knowing his wife for years and having conversations with, like, it's just amazing how God set it all up and just laid all the pieces out, and his story of how God is calling him to run for governor of the state of Kansas is so much of that, like just the seed planting and, a season of not necessarily growing, but just it's there, it's dormant. And then, and then God opening doors.
Yeah. I just love how he shares how it wasn't even his idea necessarily first, might have been his wife that planted the seed, and how he just kind of deferred it to prayer. He's like, let's pray about it, Yeah. I think there's a few marriages or instances in marriages that probably happen that way, and then it develops into something. But I just love how he talks about the different things, that steps or people or things that he's like, wow, this really is God. And he was praying about it, and he just continued just to feel that nudge from him to be courageous and be strong and courageous, as the Lord says, and to step into this space. And, it's took years of praying to get here. And I just absolutely love that they've got, the family backing, that they were all in it. He talks about how each of the kids and, everybody played a part in coming to this decision, and just his foundation of how he was raised. And it's exciting to see what the Lord's going to do through Philip.
Yeah. I love too his acknowledgement of, like, because y'all know I say this all the time, is that, like, our job is to be obedient. Our job is not the results, nor are we guaranteed results. And he even acknowledges that. He goes, God called me to run, and is telling me, he did not tell me I'm going to win. He goes, it'd be nice.
Yeah.
Like,
if you go through all the sacrifice to do this.
Exactly.
But that's
it would
not
be
necessarily
great.
The result.
Right. And so he knows that, you praise God when we get the results, so we would love. And then you also praise God just in the moment of being obedient. And I just thought that was an incredible story. And we wanted to share it. Obviously, you guys know us. We're not a political podcast per se. We share our biblical worldviews. We want to encourage Christ followers to be more bold and to step in their faith. And that was the reason that we highlighted and had Philip on, was because it was clearly a God calling and stepping and being able to share that with you guys as housewives, as parents, as wives, is that, the world is different now, very much so in the last 60 days. And it's more than ever, I think God is calling us to step out into the uncomfortable and not be silent and to lean on Him more because it's just because if we're comfortable, we're not leaning on God.
Nope.
And we're not growing in God.
We need to rise up and we need to speak out. We need to trust Him and we need to lead our family alongside, obviously, our husbands. But that's our job as mamas.
Yep. And so with that, we're going to give you this episode. And this is for the one who God is calling.
Enjoy. Hey, housewives, welcome back.
Welcome back, housewives.
We are so excited to have another guest with us in studio.
In-house.
In-house, yes, in Tori's house.
Tori's house. At least it's not our closet.
Yes, we've moved on. We're very excited to have Philip with us today, and I'm going to let Tori do the bio today.
All right. So this is Philip Sarnecki, and is a Kansas businessman, family man, and job creator who has built companies that today employ approximately 1,000 people across multiple industries. He founded and led the RPS Financial Group, Inc., growing it into one of the largest financial service firms in the nation before selling the company. In addition to financial services, he owns businesses in various industries that strengthen communities and create jobs. One of the fun parts is he is part owner of the 513 Films, a movie production company whose projects have featured Mel Gibson, David Henry, Kevin Sorbo, Kevin James, Academy Award winner Shirley Jones, and Grammy Award winner Rebecca St. James, with a focus on faith-based themes and family values. In addition, he owns companies in automotive, leadership, employee benefits, and real estate. He's a jack of all trades, to say. His commitment to service extends beyond business. He is the former chairman of the Board of Trustees of Athletes in Action, a past board member of the board of directors for the FINSCA, and past chairman of the Northwestern Mutual Managing Partners Association. He has coached youth and high school baseball for nearly a decade, and he is the son of a janitor and secretary. Philip has never forgotten his blue-collar roots and values. Guided by his Christian faith and conservative values, Philip believes in hard work, strong families, and accountable leadership, not career politics. He is unafraid to take on the entrenched interests and bring a business-minded, results-driven approach to government. Welcome, Philip.
Thank you, ladies.
Welcome.
Great to be here.
I have, our children go to the same school. And so I have had the pleasure of knowing your wife, Heidi. And so this, I've known Heidi for years. And so this just kind of came in the works because in early September, you made the announcement that you are running for governor of Kansas.
Correct.
And you have never run for political office before.
Correct.
And I say that as a good thing.
Yes, correct.
And you say that as proud.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
But when my husband and I had the pleasure of meeting with you and Heidi early on this year, and you were talking to us, and we were like, okay, how did this come about? And you just flat out said, you're like, God. It was God.
Yep.
And that really, inspired me early in 2025. And so the cultural climate has changed much in 2025 here in the fall and winter. A lot of things have happened. But God has been calling you to this role to do this for years.
Correct.
Will you how does God call one to say, I want you to run for governor?
Yeah. Great question. I've pondered that. And, really as we've gone through this process, as you've said, it's been a multi-year process. And I think, first of all, it's just something God puts on your heart. It is something that, you believe you might have the gifts, skills, and talents and experiences to use in whatever role that may be. In this case, being the CEO of the state, being the governor. And then I think it gets confirmed by multiple people, by doors that get opened over a long period of time. I'm very analytical. I'm a very analytical person. I have gut decisions, but I always kind of, on big decisions, I go through like this really analytical process to evaluate it. And we actually got to the point where Heidi, my wife, said, honey, what more confirmation do you need? I don't want to end up, on a boat to Tarshish and then in the belly of a whale by us not being obedient.
Oof, good.
And so there was no question in our mind after several years of praying about this, talking to people kind of in the political business, talking to donors, friends, that this was very clear where God has called us at this moment in time.
That's incredible. But for your wife, that's got to be convicting. Like, hey, don't be Jonah on this one. I love you, but I would really rather not be in the belly of a whale with you if you don't listen.
Yes.
And she's been like, I have seen her, how God has used her over the last few years. He has taken her on a path that has set her up to run this race with you, which is incredible.
Yeah, we talked about that a lot over the last several years, and especially as we really got serious about it over the past year or so, and we prayed a lot about it and had other people praying for us as well to make this decision that you can't do something like this on your own. This is a family decision. It's a decision that a husband and wife make together.
Yeah.
She would occasionally say, hey, if you're going to run for governor, and I would go, no, when we are going to run for governor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, I may, have the title, but we're doing this together. Yes. And she's been all in on that. And, Heidi, I mean, she loves people. She loves connecting with people. So she'll be a great asset on the campaign trail for sure.
Absolutely. So what planted the seed? What was the first thought of and why governor?
Well, okay, two good questions. And what planted the seed? I think the seeds were planted years and years ago. Now, sometimes those aren't growing very fast. Sometimes they're dormant. But the seeds were planted. I grew up a big fan of Ronald Reagan. My family was very blue collar. As you mentioned in the opening, my father was a janitor. My mom was a secretary. We grew up in a very small town, little farming community where faith and family and, friends are your values, your core values. And as I kind of grew up in this blue collar family in 1984, my parents voted for Ronald Reagan for the first time. They were kind of those Reagan Democrats. And the Democratic Party had really left them. So they voted for Reagan in 1984 and really never looked back. They just, kept voting Republican from that point forward. So I grew up a big fan. And then I've always loved American history. It's my favorite subject, and probably my favorite genre of American history is the American Revolution, which I love, and I've just studied God's hand in the founding of our country and, what he's done through the United States. And when I graduated from high school, I got nominated to attend the National Youth Leadership Conference in Washington, D.C. I had never been on an airplane before. My family couldn't afford to fly. So I literally, the first time on an airplane, I had to go raise my own money, a little bit like I'm doing now.
Yeah.
I had to go raise my own money to go out to Washington, D.C. We spent a couple of weeks on the Georgetown campus out there, and it was an election year. So here's this young man who's never been on an airplane, son of a janitor, little farming community of 1,000 people, going out to Washington, D.C. in an election year. And so it was just fascinating, and it really kind of pulled me in. So I think between that and that is really where a lot of the seeds were originally planted. And, then over time, God just kind of kept nurturing that. In the back of my mind, I kind of wondered, I don't know, would I ever get involved in politics someday as a way to serve and a way to give back? This is obviously not my career. I've built my career in the business world for, 3 decades. But the opportunity presented itself. And Heidi and I were always the people on the other side, writing the checks, being donors, hosting things at our house, trying to get good conservative people elected. And we got really frustrated in a state where Donald Trump won 58% of the vote. and we haven't elected a Democratic senator in almost 100 years. We are the longest running state without a Democratic senator, and yet we've had a liberal Democratic governor the last 2 cycles now for 7 years. And what I saw were career politicians that were running. And they're nice people, by the way. I know them all. I've written checks to several of them, Heidi and I have, through the years. But it's just like, I didn't want to go there again. And I felt we needed something different. You see what Donald Trump's doing at the federal level. And there are actually a lot of governors. At one point, there were about a dozen around the country who had never run for office. They came out of the business world. They were CEOs and business leaders. Functionally, the governor's job, because you asked why governor, and I did get approached about potentially running for the United States Senate or running for the 3rd Congressional District. But I had a couple of thoughts. One is I don't want to be in Washington, D.C. Fine to visit, but I don't want to be there permanently. And number 2, that's not where my skill set is. My skill set is as a business leader and a CEO. I literally started my first business when I was 19 years old. I was a teenager in college, and I've been doing that ever since. And so I know where God has gifted me. I know what my skill set is, and it's leadership, and it's leading large organizations and large teams and building teams and attracting talent and solving problems and holding people accountable. And that is really what the governor's job is. I'm in a group CEO forum with Glenn Youngkin, the governor of Virginia, and Glenn had never run for office either. He had been the CEO of a company, a firm, the Carlyle Group. And he and I were talking last summer, 2024, when we were still kind of praying through this and deciding what we wanted to do. And he made this observation that he shared with me, where he said, Philip, people have a tendency to just kind of throw all the political jobs in the same bucket, whether you're a senator, governor, Congress, whatever it may be. He said, but the reality is the CEO job or the governor's job is a different job that takes a different skill set. It's a CEO job. And he said all the gifts and skills that you've developed over the last 3 decades fit perfectly into that role. And he said, I don't follow Kansas politics that closely, but it sounds to me like what you've done over the last couple of governor's races is you've tried to take legislators and kind of cram them into an executive leadership position where, they don't have that background or that skill set.
It's a really good observation.
Yeah. I mean, and I like the success in one area and doesn't always translate to success in another area. And like you said, the legislators, you can be a great legislator and not be great as a organizing people and lead, running an organization, aka a state. And so that is I don't think people think about that enough.
Right.
Or I don't think people understand job titles. Like, it's not like under senator, it's like, okay, you want this person to do this. Now, who do you want to vote for?
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, and again, legislators are obviously critically important.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying one's more important than the other. I'm just talking about skill set. And legislators, for the most part, they debate and they vote. And that's what you're not really running anything.
Right.
And so it's just a different skill set. And that wasn't something that I was interested in because, again, I know where God's gifted me. And I know the skills that I've developed over the last 30 years in the business world. And when we look at the state of Kansas, we've got a lot of issues. And a lot of those issues are around, quite honestly, the incompetence we've had from a leadership standpoint. And I believe it's people that haven't run businesses or haven't run large organizations that have led us down this path. I don't know if you all noticed, but just a few weeks ago, CNBC came out with their business rankings by state, and they had our economy in Kansas ranked 48th. They gave us an F and said we're the 3rd most likely state to go into a recession. So that and when you look at the reasons why, I mean, we have the highest personal income tax rate of all of our border states, plus you can throw in Arkansas and Iowa, which aren't technically border states, but they're close. We have the 2nd highest corporate tax rate. Our property taxes on average are about 50% higher than all those states around us. And we've also added about $10.5 billion to a $26 billion state budget just in the last 7 years, yet our population hasn't grown in over 2 decades. So if I were running a business and I had a board and they looked at those results, I wouldn't be running that business anymore.
Yeah.
And kind of all of our folks that are running against a bunch of career politicians, we need to do something different. Or our state's, it's a runaway train and it's not going in a good direction.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say too, like, obviously the research that you provide, the statistics you've given, it's not just from the last 5 years since COVID. This is something that has been going on for a while. And I would say a lot of our listeners, at least if I'm speaking to me, myself, and I know Tori is a Kansas transplant too. We're both transplants. I, being a young mom of 4, when this all kind of happened around COVID time, I was not aware of anything. Like, it is something that has just, like, eyes wide open as a mama, even as a wife, and just kind of where we're living and what's going on. I mean, I've only lived here 9 years, so only a few years under my belt before all of the change that happened in COVID. And some of the stuff that you're speaking to it's obvious, that this is where we're struggling in Kansas. I had no idea though because I feel like people are moving here all the time. We're transplants. So as far as growth, must be that people are coming as people are leaving. If we're not having that growth here.
No, that's exactly right. And you've got a lot of people that, graduate and they don't stay here.
I was going to say.
that is true.
Yeah,
and then you have retirees move out of the state, because if you retire and you're on a fixed income, maybe you get your home paid off, but your property taxes are 50% higher than all the states around it on average. And then we have the highest personal income tax rate of all those states around us. Well, people go, oh, I could move to Tennessee or Texas or Florida, or Wyoming, where they don't have a state income tax. And that's going to save me, X amount of dollars in my retirement. So then you lose a lot of people that retire in the state as well. So they might, build a career here. Another issue we've got in Kansas, and this has become, I knew this was the case because I own a lot of businesses and companies, but I really, I didn't know how bad it was until I've talked to some legislators. I talked to a Kansas state senator, and she was kind of telling me how really bad this is. But to start a new business in the state of Kansas, the amount of bureaucracy and red tape that you have to go through to get one started is very challenging. And we have got to remove barriers so that people can start a lot more small businesses in Kansas. And it's just too much government interference is a big part of the problem.
Yeah, we bought a small business, but it was established. It was established. Mm-hmm. There's no way we could do what we have done in the couple of years that we've owned it had we just said, okay, we're going to start this from scratch. We'll just acquire assets and then start, because like you said, the barriers that are just unreal. And we're realizing that people want to stay in Kansas. They want to support Kansas. Yeah. And I mean, one of the stories that and Andrew just still laughs at it, is the fact that we had lived here for about a year. And I'm a Texas girl through and through. And my parents live in Dallas, and I'm an only child. So, I took their 2 granddaughters and moved them and, we are looking at his life insurance, which every husband wants, their family to be taken care of, but not too taken care of. That's an incentive to take them out, right? So he's just like, he goes, all right, well, let's make sure that in the event that something happens to me, that you can get back to Texas to your parents. And I was like, I don't know. And he's like, I'm sorry, what? And because I grew up in Dallas, high school in Dallas, my college was actually closer to my parents' house than my high school was. And I was like, I don't want to go back. I love Kansas. And it was a real hard pill to swallow at first.
To admit that.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. I'm sorry, Texas. Because and as a Texan, you don't believe anything's north of you.
Yeah.
And so.
Whole nother country.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Y'all are all Canada, according to Texas. But and he was just like, wow. Like that. I mean, and that speaks of Kansas, obviously, and that's just my personal, but it is a fantastic place to raise a family. Yes. Yep. I know Tracy's circumstances, your husband was from this area and you guys lived in Chicago, and then you guys moved back to raise the family and have the family here. Yep. Like, people want to be here. And it's like a little hidden gem, and you don't want to tell everybody that. You're like, no, this is great. Because I know as a person I'm watching Dallas from afar, I'm like, don't California my Texas. Because people are like, well, leaving California because they can't handle, what they've voted for.
Right.
And then and I'm seeing, Texas and certain areas turn purple. And I'm like, that's not what you want.
Well, the greatest asset in the state of Kansas is the people.
Yeah.
But the problem is our government is not, and listen, government's never going to be perfect. I don't care who's running it. You're going to have issues and problems. But we are really failing our people in the state of Kansas. And we've got to make it more attractive for people to stay here, for people to retire here, for people to move here, to grow our population. And part of that is starting new businesses. It's attracting new business. But we're struggling to do that in the scale that we need to do it, with the current underlying kind of foundations we have with the taxes and things that I talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Well, I love that you're coming to this from just like you said, God has given you talents and skill sets, and that's what you're bringing to the table. But you also, it's not that you're just coming from that, though. Your foundation is faith, family, and the values in which we absolutely need more of here.
Oh, amen. Yeah.
And why don't you speak on that a little bit more? Obviously, you guys have been praying about it and you feel very called to it. How do you plan to use your faith in running for governor? Obviously, I know that is your foundation and what you stand by.
Right.
So maybe just for our listeners, just tell them how you plan to use that.
Well, the reality is everybody has some kind of faith. They have faith in something or someone, or sometimes faith for a lot of people is government.
Yeah.
Like that's where they put their faith, sadly.
Yeah.
But
true.
Yeah, my faith is in Jesus. My faith is in the author and perfecter of my faith. And it's going to guide everything that I do, just like it guides everything that everyone does. Even the people that have no faith, they call it no faith. That is faith.
Yeah.
And that is guiding them. That is guiding their values and the decisions that they make. And so certainly it would be the same with me, just like it's been in my business, as well. And, so I think, God is not silent on government. God has very specific ways that he believes that, government should be run. And I just think, gosh, what if we were to do more of that? What would it look like?
Yeah.
And I think it would look really good and really attractive. And, we got to continue to strengthen the family, the core family. I mean, obviously that's critical as well. We need to grow our population, and we just need to make it easier and more affordable, to live here, because it's becoming more and more of a problem, and it's been creeping and creeping for years. And now it's really becoming a challenge, and we're getting beat, if you will, by the states that are around us that are attracting more people, and oftentimes from the state of Kansas, people from the state of Kansas.
Yeah, there's quite a few that live in other states and work in Kansas. I mean, I know people, the Missouri side. I mean, that's
especially here, yeah.
Yeah, especially here. It's very common.
Sure.
I mean, that was something that it does. There is that level of wait, what? You live, you reside, you do all the things in Missouri, but then you're working here, that, and I understand people make sacrifices on certain things, and sometimes that's the best thing. But again, it's starting in your home first.
Yeah.
And that is something that as Kansans, we, start, what we can do is here locally. This is, what's the adage is President Trump's an outlier, of course, of they say that it's more important for you to vote for your local politics, because that's going to affect your day to day so much more than who's in the presidential office.
Yeah.
And you're just, it's just bringing light on that. And how does it feel when God is nudging you in this direction? I mean, were you like, okay, Lord, I'll just walk through some of these doors and just see what happens? Or was it you got to be kidding me. I'm not doing I can ride off into the sunset, Lord, and retire and enjoy my grandkids and my, or what was your reaction, and what did it feel like when you were you're really asking me to do this?
It was actually both. It was, okay, when we started praying about it, Heidi and I, and we had some other friends and family start praying about it as well. It's like, okay. And I had some really interesting things happen. I'll give you one example. After the 2022 gubernatorial election, when we lost again for the second time, what's overall, again, a very red state. I mean, when Donald Trump wins close to 60% of the vote, but, we have a liberal Democratic governor. So a couple of things happened. My wife actually looked at me and said, well, maybe it's time you did something about it. And,
whoa. I can totally hear that in Heidi's voice.
Yeah. And as any good husband of now almost 27 years, I completely blew her off. No, but, again, it was just another one of those seeds, right, where we're planted. And now it felt like, oh, maybe God's really starting to water these seeds and this is starting to grow. And literally I said, well, you know what? Okay, fine. We'll start praying about it and we'll see if God kind of moves and opens any doors. And I think in a lot of ways, me saying that was like my way of just deferring it.
Right.
We'll pray about it.
Yeah.
And then, but we did. And 3 days later, I was at my son, who's now a senior, was a freshman at the time. And we had this like basketball preseason opening deal at somebody's house. And there's a pastor here in town who also teaches a class at our kids' school. And I hadn't seen him in months. I mean, it had been 4 or 5 months. Hadn't talked to him, hadn't seen him through the summer, et cetera. And he literally walks directly up to me. He doesn't say hi. He doesn't say hello. He walks up to me and looks at me and goes, when are you going to run? And I looked at him and I said, run for what? Run what? Like a marathon?
Yeah, run the 5K. Right. What are we doing?
Yeah, I'm not running a marathon. I've had 3 knee surgeries. Like, when are you going to run for office? And I looked at him, like, okay, what is he know? Have you been talking to Heidi?
I was going to say, the first thought I had was, did you talk to my wife?
Yeah, how much money did Heidi pay you?
And he said, no, I haven't even seen her. And I kind of looked at him, and I looked up like, all right, Lord, what's, going on here? Now, granted, it was shortly, like within a week of the election that year, but he said, no, you would be so good at this. I think, this is something that you'd be great at. And I said, well, it's funny you say that. And so I kind of shared it with him. Again, this is 3 years ago. And he was so excited. He was like, I'm going to be praying for you. This is so exciting, and I mean, a genuine enthusiasm. And so that's kind of where a few years ago it really all started. And I have, a number of things like that, just kind of, again, circumstances, doors opening, encouragement that happened over that period of time where, again, over that, we really made the decision, even though we made the decision this spring, early in the spring, even though we didn't announce till September because we were selling our businesses, and not all of them, but most our large businesses. And we were building our team and getting ready to make the run. And I also did look to see who was running, and I even talked to some people that, some pretty well-known names, like could they be running, people that had been in Kansas politics before, even national politics from Kansas. And, when I looked at the field and just said, we're going to do the same thing again. We've got just nothing but career politicians running who have over 100 years of political experience between 4 people. And I said, that's just not what we need. We need something completely different.
Yeah, we need change.
And we do. And we need somebody, whether it was me or somebody else, from the outside looking in, not that is kind of grown up in the swamp, is beholden to people that have helped them with their quote unquote political careers.
Yeah.
This isn't my career. This isn't what I've done. I can truly come in and serve and not be beholden to other people that have advanced my political career and things like that.
What kind of faith does it take to walk away, not walk away, but to go, okay, I'm getting out of something that I know I am successful in.
Right.
It provides a level of financial
Sure.
is a security.
Sure.
I mean, you need money to live, and you want to be able to take care of your family for the rest of our life, that kind of thing. You're very successful in business. So to be saying, okay, God, I'm going to sell these businesses.
Right.
I'm going to hand over these things to do something that you've called me to do, where there is absolutely no guarantee, because that one, I'm going to win, right? Because I always talk about our job is to be obedient. God's job is the results.
Yeah.
Right.
Win or lose, we praise him.
Right.
And that very well could be the case. But how do you do that as someone who has been so successful and a provider for your family? And for that not to be part of your identity and just be like, I can't let go of the businessman side.
Right.
How has that been?
It is not, in some ways hasn't been difficult, and in other ways it's been very difficult. I know that sounds like a strange answer, but I do believe that God has not called us to live in a comfort zone. I don't think that he's called us into retirement, quote unquote, like you traditionally think of it. Doesn't mean you might not do something different, serve in a different way, et cetera. But I think where God calls us, God will equip us. Number one, it does take faith to step out and walk away from something that I was very, 3+ decades. I mean, very comfortable, very good at, had developed, those gifts and skills and talents over that long period of time, and to do something different. But at the same time, that's kind of what's a little bit exhilarating and energizing about doing that. And I can say that I have felt, now we're only, 3+ weeks, almost, about 4 weeks into the campaign here, but I have felt a tremendous sense of peace. And it's gone extremely well for the first, 4 weeks. The response has been fantastic. But, not everything is perfect, certainly, and it's not going to be. But in spite of that, I have felt a tremendous sense of peace that I know beyond any shadow of a doubt that I'm doing what God's called me to do. And just because God calls us to something, it doesn't mean that it's going to be easy either.
Right.
And we have to be clear about that. I have challenged my leaders, the people in my organization for years to not be satisfied with being comfortable. Because one of the things I know in life is we don't grow in a comfort zone. We don't grow personally, we don't grow professionally, we don't grow financially, and we don't grow spiritually. We never, ever grow in a comfort zone. And so what I'm doing here, from a personal standpoint, is I'm stepping out of that comfort zone that I've kind of created over many years, and God has blessed us. But we've done it to now walk into, another phase where the great part about that is it takes a lot of trust and a lot of faith, when you walk out of that comfort zone.
Yeah. One of my favorite authors and books, John Maxwell, and one of them, I can't even remember which book it is, but he talks about the leadership lid and how you get capped. And I just listened to a sermon this week, and I can't even tell you which one, but the one thing I loved about that was we can be spiritually capped too.
Yeah.
If you are not pouring out the gifts that God gave you,
right,
and allowing what you've learned and what you've gained from the Lord to bless others, you can absolutely become spiritually capped.
Right.
And it's something that I love that you're doing both. You're taking your leadership level up by growing to a space that you've not been in before.
Right.
But also spiritually, you are bringing that along your journey so that you can bless others by pouring out your faith. Being called into this is that alone is such a message of faith and trust in God that is just admirable, just like you said when you first found out. It's really awesome.
Yeah. Well, full transparency, I own a company that John Maxwell started, LeaderCast. John Maxwell started that company about 25 years ago, and it's a great leadership company.
And you can absolutely speak way more to that than the three books that I've read.
I knew that. I'm glad that you said God.
But I didn't. So there you go.
But it was just funny. It was perfect tie-in, Tracy. Perfect.
I didn't even know. I love it when I do that.
It was a great time, and it's well said. And here's another book. There's another book that I'm a big fan of called The Dream Giver. I don't know if you're all familiar with The Dream Giver, but It's by Bruce Wilkinson, and it's a parable about a young man named Ordinary who decides that he's been called by God to go out and do great things. Ordinary lives in the land of familiar. Okay. So when he gets called, and the first thing he's got to do is deal with what the author calls his border bullies. And border bullies are oftentimes, they're the people in your life, they quite frankly might be the people that love you the most. They might be your parents, they might be your spouse, your friends, your family. But what happens is they go, oh, and oftentimes they don't admit this or don't even realize it, you're messing with my comfort zone. It's not your comfort zone I'm worried about. It's my comfort zone.
Sure.
Yeah,
and by
the
you
ripple
leaving
effect.
the land of familiar, you're messing with my comfort zone. And so they don't like that. And so they push back and say, well, wait a minute now. Ladies, nobody ever leaves the land of familiar. You just stay here in your comfort zone, right? And once you get through the border bullies, then you encounter your own giants, as what the author calls them. And your own giants are your own doubts and fears. And I went through all that as well.
Yeah.
And so you encounter that. But if you know he's calling you and those doors are opening, you've got to keep moving and walking through him. And that's that testing of our faith is what grows our faith, as we go out and do that.
That's so good. I'm going to have to get that book.
I was going to say, add that to the list
know, it's a good
of
list.
Audible books.
Yeah, it's a fun book. It's an easy read, and it's actually had a big impact a couple of times in my life, but including this run for governor.
No, so to continue on that, when more than ever, I know in seasons where God is calling us to something specific and something that's not easy on its own. I mean, it in itself is not easy, but then comes the spiritual attacks.
Absolutely.
The enemy, the unseen that people sometimes pretends not there, try to deny is not there. Like that's very real too. Absolutely. And I know because I've talked to your wife about it. Like I know, how are you preparing your family and your circle to handle those things and be like, okay, have your head on a swivel, because there is nothing more than the enemy wants than to knock us out of this or off our, lose our focus on what God's called us.
Right.
How do you prepare the people around you for that?
Well, we had many conversations about it. My oldest is out of state, so she wasn't, overly concerned about it. My son is a senior in high school. He's been very encouraging from the beginning, even to the point he's like, Dad, you need to run. Our state needs you. I'm like, oh, son, gosh, that's...
Put that on an endorsement.
I know,
right?
I know, right? But then my youngest daughter, who's a sophomore, she's like, no, they don't. Because she has not wanted me to run. And she doesn't like, just the name being out there, living a public life. And quite frankly, I struggled with that as well. I'm a pretty private person. And, that was part of what I had to go through in what God was calling us to do. Like in a lot of ways, I'd like, no, I'd just rather kind of live my life here and, not have everything you do or say scrutinized to the nth degree, taken out of context, misunderstood. But we did talk to our kids about it, and we said, listen, you know who your dad is. You know his character. So when you start reading that your dad is evil and, beats our neighbor's kids and, he might be the Antichrist, it's like, don't believe it. You know who your dad is.
Yeah.
And because that stuff will probably come at some point, especially as we get more and more competitive in this, which we believe we certainly will, because the message is certainly resonating, that's for sure. So we talked about it a lot. We talked about it as a family. And then the other thing to do is, the prayer. And I have a prayer team that we put together, and got that idea actually from Glenn Youngkin, from Governor Youngkin. And just to bathe our family and me and Heidi and our marriage and our kids and our businesses, just to bathe everything in prayer, because we're going to need it for sure. Yeah.
I love that. Our life coach always used to tell us, circle the wagon. Like, just keep circling your marriage, your family, your kids, just keep circling it. Don't guard your heart, guard your family. And, and I love that you've set up a prayer team.
Yeah.
Now, didn't your daughter, and if I'm wrong, we can cut this, but didn't she come around and and have a poignant statement to you?
She did. Yeah. We, at the beginning of the year, just as this kind of a final, all right, Lord, are we sure here? We've spent at that point 2.5 years.
Are you sure you're sure?
Right,
like,
exactly.
right?
Yeah. Heidi was like, I don't know what other confirmations you need, but.
That's why I love Heidi. Heidi's like, he said yes 2 years ago.
Right.
Come on. What are we doing?
Yeah. I'm the analytical process one.
But your marriage is very typical. Like we are in the same boat. Don't let her act like we're not. We have all these great ideas too, but our husbands take a while to come around.
Right.
Hence, one of them is the podcast in my living room right now. So.
Exactly. That I get to benefit from.
Yes. Here you go.
It was a good decision. So, but anyway, so we spent several days praying about it, fasting about it. We had a whole group, like a lot of people, several dozen people doing that for us as well. And on the third day, when we were kind of done, Ava, we had actually started this. We were in Colorado. We got home. I was standing in our kitchen, and Ava just walked up to me, my youngest, and said, Dad, I know you and Mom, and, you got people praying about this for you and, deciding this decision. And she looks at me and says, I just want you to know I still don't want you to run. And I said, well, I know, honey. Now, Ava and I, she and I are the most alike of my 3 children. And one of the things we have is a love of history. And so she also loves American history. And I've talked to her before. I said, our founding fathers pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. And I said, if God's just calling us to be uncomfortable, if he's calling us, to live a public life, if that's what he's calling us to do, that's really a small sacrifice compared to what so many people have made. You think about military family, et cetera. My father was in Vietnam. My grandfather was in World War II, et cetera. You think about the sacrifices that they made. But she looked at me, and after she said, I know, I just still don't want you to run, she said, but I know God wants you to run.
Aww.
And I thought, wow, okay. Because, we had really been, not that we had to have her on board, but we really kind of wanted her on board.
Okay,
nice.
Yeah. Right.
And so to hear that was really kind of one of the final confirmations I needed that, okay, we need to go here.
Yeah. That's what a mature spiritual thing to say, because there's so many times where you just, like, God, if there's any other way,
right?
If there's any other way, Jesus said it. If there's any other way, Lord, please.
And I said that many times.
Yeah,
many times.
Right? If this is not, if you can do it, please don't. I would really rather not.
Yeah. Well, think about it. We all love our comfort zones. You know why we like comfort zones? Because they're really comfortable.
Yeah.
Right.
We don't want judgment.
I liked my comfort zone. I had kind of created this little comfort zone in the business world, and, things were going great. But, God sometimes rips you out of a comfort zone.
Yeah.
So what, like I alluded to earlier, there are a lot of things that have changed since September. One of the biggest turning points, I will say, and that's not using those words lightly, obviously, was the assassination of Charlie Kirk. There has been an outpour, a revival of love for our country, people becoming Christ curious, people who are more going, wait, what happened? Like more open-minded to just have conversation. But there is a group, the group that's like Charlie that started it, that we've known all along. Like we love our country and we love our families and we know that this is where God has us. But I think we've been silent for too long. What encouragement would you give those believers? Because this is our time. Yeah. There's, like you said, in American history, our founding fathers were created for such a time as this. Yeah. It must there is nobody else in the world. He hand selected every single one of those gentlemen to sign the Constitution. There's no doubt about it. And between the mamas, the fathers listening to this, and then preparing our children, because, while we may not be out there and having dialogue and conversation, we may very well be raising those that are going to have the conversation and the dialogue and who's going to call for the uncomfortable. How would you encourage those to lean in and to get over the comfort zone? Like, What would you say to those believers?
Well, first of all, just a little surreal moment. I was actually in the White House when Charlie Kirk got shot. My campaign manager and I were visiting the White House. We were having some conversations with some people at the White House, the political team. So I was in the West Wing. It was a very surreal moment. People started running around. Charlie Kirk has a lot of friends at the White House. I mean, personal friends. It wasn't just like, oh, this guy Charlie Kirk that we know and have heard of. They're personal friends. The president was a personal friend. He was 2 rooms over from me and my campaign manager when Charlie Kirk got shot. And, people were running around like, oh, does the president know? And has he heard? And we were kind of gathered around a little TV there in the West Wing. But so I think what Charlie has done is, and by the way, I'd met him a couple times. I did not know him well, but I do know people that knew him very well. As a matter of fact, the next morning I met with someone in D.C. who knew him and his wife very well. As a matter of fact, knew his wife prior to them meeting. So before Charlie and Erica met, she knew his wife. So, I mean, she was, obviously pretty emotional when we met with her that next morning. But I think what he's done is he's emboldened people with courage. And, Joshua 1:9 is be strong and courageous. And I forget that it's 4 or 5 times just there that, God calls Joshua to be strong and courageous. And I think that in our time right now, and I'm hopeful, we may be going through a revival right now. In a lot of ways, it seems like that.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, exactly.
I want our kids to be part of it. Yeah.
Well, and if you understand history and you understand American history, our country has gone through, there's almost kind of a pattern of revivals in America. And it's kind of an interesting thing to study. But so I think what he's hopefully called us to do, he literally sacrificed his life for other people to go on campuses with college students and share and argue from a biblical standpoint, his faith, his worldview, and do it in a way, regardless of what the liberals are trying to say. I still haven't seen a video anywhere where he was disrespectful to people.
Yeah.
He disagreed with people.
Right.
Yes.
And unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there, especially on the left, the far left, who basically, if you disagree, well, you're hateful.
Yeah.
Well, no, I just disagree. Can we have a conversation about the fact that we disagree? And I think Charlie did that with such excellence.
Yeah.
And so, he was so winsome about it. So I'm hoping that, and I think it's true, I think what you've seen is people to really stand up to be courageous. Maybe that's running for office. Maybe it's supporting people that run for office. Maybe it's starting a ministry. Maybe it's starting a business. Maybe it's something to do with your family. Maybe it's to be courageous to go back to your wife or husband or whatever it may be. There's a place that we need to step out and be courageous and, trust God to help us with that.
Yeah. I just love his message just in general of faith, family, that's where it starts. And, I think we've said this a couple different times, it's like working for something and getting to the top. Well, without your family by your side.
Pretty lonely place.
Yeah, it's lonely.
Yeah.
It's not.
I can tell you leadership can be very lonely even with your family by your side.
Yeah.
Because, if you're the CEO of an organization or the leader of an organization, you don't have people in your own organization who understand that role because they're not in that role.
Yeah.
That's why I was in a CEO group, for example. And so it's critical. My goodness, without, my wife and my family by my side through all these years, who knows where I'd be.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going to end this on a selfish question. Surprise, guys. You're an American history buff. What book would you recommend everyone read for American history? Or even if it's just the Revolution, what is your favorite American history book? Because I love American history as well. So I'm selfishly asking that.
Yeah, there's a book. So my favorite president is George Washington.
Yes,
and
mine too.
I love Lincoln. I love Reagan. I think Calvin Coolidge was highly underrated, by the way.
Okay.
A former governor.
Yeah.
But anyway, if you study Calvin Coolidge. But Washington, one of my favorite George Washington stories is the fact, when the Revolutionary War ended, George Washington, all he wanted to do was go home to Mount Vernon. I mean, I believe, and I may not have this exactly right, but he'd only been home like the 8 years of the American Revolution, like 3 times. And so you talk about sacrifice. All he wanted to do was go home. He wanted to go home to his farm, go home to his family. And he knew, though, that he had to be president. He was the person that God was calling to be president. And that wasn't in an arrogant way. It was actually in a very humble way, him knowing that he was called to be president of this brand new nation. And then he does 1 term, 4 years, and then he does it again. So now he's 8 years as a president, desperately wants to go home. And so at the end of his 2nd term, keep in mind there were no term limits then, so they wanted him to serve again. They wanted him to go a 3rd term, and he said, no, I'm not going to do that. He finally said, we just defeated a monarchy, and I don't want to create another one here, by me hanging around in this office. And King George said at the time, he said, if George Washington gives up the presidency of the United States of America, keep in mind, we just defeated the greatest army on the face of the earth. And he said, if he gives that up and walks away from it, he is the greatest man who ever lived. And that's exactly what George Washington did. And he walked away from the presidency after, 8 years of serving. And so there's a book on George Washington's life called, not Into the Fire. Why do I have it? Into the Fire? It's Fire. Now that's terrible. I'm going blank. But there's a book, you can Google it. It's George Washington's life. And that's probably my, if not my favorite, one of my favorites.
Okay. All right. Since George Washington, will you also tell the story about the Lord's Prayer where he, not the Lord's Prayer, where the painting, the painting where before the battle, he's praying?
Well, yeah, that was crossing the Delaware.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting about that is...
Sorry, this is now turned into a history podcast.
Right.
I apologize, but this is for my own.
Yeah.
Nerd alert.
Yeah.
All the American history teachers will love this.
Yes.
But no, I think it was a private actually, but there's a journal that was written and kept by one of the not officers, but private one of the military folks that was with George Washington crossing the Delaware. And what's really interesting is that he talks about how this fog fell upon just over the American army that was, kind of stuck there. And they were really kind of facing sure defeat. And he really talks about how this unusual fog fell only on the American army, and it allowed them basically, and Washington made this decision with the fog there to cross the Delaware, and it helped kind of obscure the army crossing the Delaware. And then once they crossed, in his journal he had written how the fog had lifted, and it was just like this miraculous thing, right? Where the fog just comes around the encampment and encloses them and allows them under the quiet of darkness and of night, and now under this fog, to cross the Delaware. And because if we had lost that battle, we probably lose the American Revolution, and we're all talking with different accents.
Yes,
much more
exactly.
British accents, yeah.
But it was just amazing how much a man of faith George Washington was.
No question.
And it's just, for people to say that there's this separation of church and faith, which is a lie, even atheists will admit that the country is much better off with the moralistic views of a Christian than no faith at all. And that has just been...
Well, that's something we talked about with Pastor Zach Terry.
Yeah, exactly. That it is just but
they've really tried to whitewash the faith of our founders for sure. And it's pretty easy really if you go do some research, it's pretty easy to realize that most of them were Bible-believing Christians or deists, and what they've tried to tell us is not true. And it's not hard. David Barton, if you follow David, I just saw him in Boston actually a couple weekends ago. Phenomenal research about history and the American Revolution, et cetera, our founders. It's a great place to go and get information on that.
Well, and it goes back to, we circle back to the the faith is where it all is. And that's the foundation. And I'm so thankful that that you are running
Well, thank you.
for governor and that you are so outspoken about it. And that you sacrificed part of your time to sit here with us and
this is great.
answer housewife questions, but also in the light of the current climate, culture climate, talk about where you're coming from and why you believe what you believe and why it is for the greater good of Kansas and that you were called to it and that, win or lose, you're being obedient. And that's what is the most important thing is that we are seeing another example of somebody just being obedient to God's will.
Yeah, and I can tell you, I don't know that God's called me to win. I don't know
Right?
that. I hope he has, because
Right.
I am sacrificing a lot to do it. But, okay, that's fine. But I do know he's called me to run. There's no question about it. And
Well, we get the title of calling you the unlikely governor.
Yes, we get that.
get that.
right.
Copyright.
Okay, I like that.
Copyright, the unlikely governor.
Yes.
Copyright.
I like that a lot.
Well, thank you
Yes, thank
so
you.
much
Thank you,
for your
ladies.
time, Philip.
Thanks
We
for
so
having me.
appreciate it. And housewives, until next time. Bye.
Whether we made you laugh or cry today, we pray you feel appreciated, bolder and braver than yesterday, stronger and more faithful for tomorrow, and living in who you were made to be today.
Join our online community on Facebook, link in the show notes, and be sure to review and subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you enjoy listening. Until next time, housewives, we give you permission to walk confidently, free, and to be intentional in your slippers or stilettos.